All right, hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today on Talking Health Tech. In today's episode, we're joined by Lynette Reeves from Miroma Project Factory and Professor Kim Delbaere from Neuroscience Australia. Today, we're going to dive into the world of digital care at home solutions and how they're empowering older adults to live independently for longer, supporting caregivers, and improving the way we approach aging and chronic conditions. I guess firstly, let's kick off some introductions. Lynette, why don't you start us off by telling us a little bit about yourself, your role, and maybe a bit more about Miroma Project Factory more broadly.
Awesome. Hi, welcome everyone. I'm Lynette. I work for Miroma Project Factory. We are a digital development studio. We're based in Surrey Hills in Sydney, and we've spent a long time building digital products in the health and wellness space, but also more broadly in other areas. But what we really like to do differently is that we bring a lot of behavioral psychology into this space. So we specialize a lot in behavior change, behavioral economics, and bringing narrative storytelling into our digital products to help people achieve their outcomes, whether it's to quit smoking or to lose weight or to recover from knee surgery. All of those things we can help to make the products more sticky. We work alongside a lot of research organizations like Neura, CSIRO, etc. We do a lot in that clinical pilot MVP space all the way through up to commercialization of our products. So it's really fun to be able to talk about some of the work we do today.
Thanks, Lynette. Over to you, Kim.
Yeah, so I'm Kim Delbaere. I'm a professor conjoint at UNSW, and so I work at Neuroscience Research Australia as the Director of Innovation and Translation of the Falls and Balance and Injury Research Centre. And so that kind of roughly sums up kind of what I do, I guess. So we are looking for solutions to prevent falls at scale. So that is in older people. And the reason why we've kind of ventured down that path is that we've done so much work over the past 30 years or so that we really know how to prevent falls, but we're not reaching all the older people in Australia or in the world. And that's why we are working now with Miroma Project Factory to find a solution that we can deliver these programs at scale. So we do that for falls prevention, but also for recovery after an injury, or if an acute health event has happened, for example, a stroke, then we use that similar programs to help them recover.
I guess let's start off a little bit by talking about human-centered design in health tech. I guess, Lynette, your work involves leveraging psychological insights to kind of drive positive behaviour change. So I'd like to talk a little bit about the Standing Tall program. So how does it work? How does it cater to older adults? I guess maybe those with limited tech experience as well.
Yeah, it's actually very true. I mean, all of the theory and the hypotheses that Kim's team have come up with over the years and the research has all led to the Standing Tall program that we've been developing with them over the past few years. And the first iteration, of course, was very much around making sure the product itself was viable and that we could prove that it worked and had good outcomes, which we have spent a long time working with the team over there doing. But a lot of what we do is very much around making sure that the product works for the person who it is for. It's really important that we may have not just one audience, but many diverse audiences. Yes, we are talking about older people, but they are not all the same within even that group. So we have to be very mindful that the assumptions that we make about older people are either tested and validated or else they are challenged, and we have to find solutions for those. And human-centered design is very much around making sure that the product is fit for purpose for the exact person we are talking to and that it can adapt to their needs and is personal to them. Kim, do you want to talk a little bit about the Standing Tall program itself and how it does adapt to elderly people and how they use the devices?
Yeah, sure. Well, I thought maybe I could also add a little bit about the human-centered design, and we call it co-design, consumer design. That's often how we phrase it as scientists as well. And we really did that together with older people. So we always say that we have designed Standing Tall with older people, for older people. And so how we have done that is we have invited people to come to Neura, and we have asked them questions on what they would be expecting from using technology for an exercise program. And that goes all the way back to 2012. And that was a time when iPads were still quite new. So not many older people would have one. Like, it was still a bit like, what do you do with it? It seems just like a big phone. And then see how they use it, how they interact with it. We played with other technology as well. We played with Kinect cameras and things like that, which was all a lot of fun. But the iPad was really what showed to have the biggest promise. It was the most user-friendly. And that is actually why we went with iPads as the initial kind of vehicle to deliver our exercise program. We asked about all different things and we listened. And an example that I always like to give is that we had made some mock-up screens of our first app. Like, that was like very kind of rudimentary. And we had the button back, the button. and they said, what does it mean? Like, you don't say where you're going back to. Like, is it back to the previous screen or back to the home screen? And it really made us realize that you don't usually write that down. You kind of know what to expect. But if you don't use technology very much, you don't know what it will be. And it is very important to be quite specific without being condescending. And that type of principle is really what we have used throughout the design. So we are very clear. We're specific in our language, but we are absolutely not condescending. So we just say what it is.
So now the back button says where it's going. I love it. I never even thought about that. That's a good example. I think you both
simplest things.
I know, the simplest things you just wouldn't think. I guess you both have touched on it, but I wanted to hear a little bit more about some of the challenges and misconceptions maybe people hold about older people using technology, I guess in your work with Standing Tall or your Live with Dementia program as well.
Yeah, just for the audience out there, MPF, we do have another healthy aging product that we have developed in association with the Department of Health and Aged Care, which is actually a program for keeping people with dementia living at home for longer. And it is designed for people with who are early stage dementia. They can actually use the app for themselves to ask for help. We all know that carers or people find it very difficult to ask for help when they need it. The app is a way to build yourself a small community who will actually come and assist you with simple everyday tasks. And as a person living with dementia, if you've got early stage dementia, you can use this app to actually ask for help. And you also have a carer who can actually advocate for you as like a paired partnership of using the app. And then as the illness might progress over time, the carer can actually take that burden on. So we actually do have these two products in this space. And some of the perceptions that we found over time is very much around a lot of people think, oh, older people can't use technology. And that's simply not true. As we are all aging, as we are generationally aging up, the younger generations, the Generation X and Ys and Zs, we're all teaching our older audiences how to use technology because they do want to use it. They want to know how to use it as long as it's really told to them in a straightforward, simple way that makes them understand about how it will benefit them. If you can show an older person or anybody who's unfamiliar with technology what the benefit is for them that allows them to stay at home for longer, to be independent for longer. Nobody wants to go into an old people's home. They want to stay at home longer and they don't want to be isolated. They want to have their community around them. If you can show them that technology can do that, they're more than happy to and willing and perfectly capable of learning how to use technology for those purposes. And you would agree with me, Kim, wouldn't you? That, you know,
I couldn't agree more. It is absolutely, but it is still a very common misperception out there, and older people also feel very self-conscious about it's a new thing. It's challenging to them, but it's not challenging to their environment. And sometimes they feel very self-conscious of not being able to understand something as quickly. But absolutely, older people are not resistant to using technology, and they definitely would like to learn. And one example that I can give, I guess, is that during COVID, we had to transition all our processes, like everyone did. But we were in the middle of a trial with Standing Tall, actually, where we had planned to do our first kind of introduction to the Standing Tall program face-to-face. So either in people's home or they would come to us, but it would be a face-to-face session. We had to transition that to telehealth. So that was challenging. It was, a bit scary for us as well. We weren't sure how that would go. But it's been one of the most rewarding things we've ever done. People would send us messages afterwards saying that it was so good and that they actually had a FaceTime chat or something similar with their grandchildren soon after, because they felt like they could do it now. They had done something with us that was very similar. And it's really about just breaking that barrier. And like Lynette is saying, designing it in a way that is user-friendly and doesn't... older people are often also worried that they will break it. And, it's hard to break technology. So that is also something to keep in mind, that the tolerance for something not working is maybe a little bit lower than with a younger group of people. So just making sure that doesn't happen is also important.
Absolutely. Yeah. You talk about, Kim, you're talking about not breaking things, but we find that in so many ways. I mean, you can build a product and you can test it all you like, build a digital product that is, you can test it from A to Z and back again and pour all the resources in it. But until it's in the hands of a real user, you don't know what might break. They may break it, but if they do, that means that I've got something to fix to make it not break in the future. But they're not going to break it. If they do, then I've done something wrong. And that's a good thing to point out. I need to know what I can do to make that product better so that they don't have this fear of things breaking. But we all get frustrated with something digital if it doesn't work the first time we do it, or it doesn't work the 10th time we do it, but it has worked every other time. These are frustrations that, it's a challenge to address, but, it's not insurmountable. And just the same with older people, as long as we can guide them through a process and understand to do this, you do this, to do that, you do that, and give them that guiding hand with easy troubleshooting and good customer support, there's no reason why you can't give them what they need.
And with that, I just also want to add that we've become a little bit of anti-ageism, advocates, I guess, within the workforce as well. There is often that misperception about older people will not be able to use the technology. But it is really important just to provide the services and also the resources to the workforce as well to deliver it to older people, because it might actually be quite challenging.
All right. So let's move on to talking a little bit more about technical considerations around scaling products like this. So Lynette, in your role, I guess, how do you approach developing an MVP for a pilot study compared to kind of full-scale products and then commercializing it?
Okay, well, the quickest and easiest way to answer that, but not the most informative, is that it does definitely come down to budget, because how long is a piece of string? When you are building an MVP, you really have to think about what the objective of that phase is to do. So you don't want to overcapitalize on the budget, build it just to cram everything in if you don't know if those things will work yet and if that's what you want to launch with. MVPs are usually there to test hypotheses or gather user feedback, validate the value proposition of what you're building. So really you want to just limit it to the essential things that will get you to that answer. And maybe you don't need any tech at all for that. Maybe you just need a really, really good, detailed, clickable design that you can then put in front of users and say, how would you use this? How would you use that? That kind of, if you're building with that in mind, then doing rapid development or rapid design can really actually benefit you before you even have to do any code at all. Because what happens then is if you've been through that phase, You can then go to a development house like us and say, we validated that these are the features we need. Now we want to build it and build it for real. And because we know what we need now and we'll know what we need later. It's really important to think, when you think tech, about the longer term roadmap. So you really need to understand what is the intention of each of those phases. We get a lot of clients who come to us who have they're on their third rebuild simply because they started small, then realized it wouldn't be able to scale because the architecture was too data heavy and it couldn't cope with thousands of concurrent users. So then they have to rebuild it just to make that house underneath it work right. I was speaking to Kat, my CEO, yesterday, and she said that for enterprise grade level platforms, it takes 3 times to rebuild something before you get to the product that can actually scale properly. We kind of do a lot of analogizing in tech, and our favored one is certainly about building a house. If you buy a house off plan and your budget can only stretch to a spec build where you get no choice in it, it's a small stamp of land and this is what you get in your house, you've got very little choice. I confess my house at the moment is one of those. I had no choice at all. I was allowed to put fly screens on the windows, and that was pretty much the only choice available to me. But it suited my budget at the time. But I know that if I want to go get a new house, I know that I want some extra plug points in there because I've lived in it now. I know what works and I know what doesn't work. I do want the fly screens because that's valuable to me, but now I want a security system as well. And then perhaps at some point along those ways, now I've lived in this version of the house. Now I want a house, which is a custom build, but now I want lots of land because I want to extend and I want to make a granny flat out the back and I want to extend a wing over here. So building technology is very similar because that large custom built house with lots of land allows me to add new features. It allows me to have lots of people using the system at once. It really puts that base in line that allows me to do that. And when you're building an MVP or that first pilot project where you've only got 100 people going to use it, it's pointless building for that big scale because you're just going to be spending all your money on building the infrastructure and nothing on features. So you can actually need to be very flexible when you're thinking about that tech roadmap and really working with somebody to understand, what does version 1 look like? What does version 2 look like? What does version 3 look like? And what does it look like from then? How do I want to handle that? And how am I going to build that over time without losing momentum, but also keeping really focused and laser focused at each particular point in time about what you're trying to achieve. You just got to remember, eBay wasn't built overnight. Facebook wasn't built overnight. Amazon certainly wasn't built overnight. Amazon started as a book purchasing e-com, and now they're selling, their infrastructure is so large and complicated and trusted that they now sell the infrastructure to other people. That's how you build these products and these platforms. You have to be very, very flexible and very understanding that there will be stages and you may need to build something that very intentionally will be thrown out. But that's a good thing because it means you know what your intent for the next product will be.
So come to you earlier on in the piece, put the code tools down and come to you when you're at the wireframe stage. Is that kind of what you're saying? Don't get too caught up in coding so early on.
I mean, companies like Miroma Project MPF here, we actually do deal with the pre-development portion of that, the strategizing as well. So we can absolutely help you to even achieve that part of it and actually work out what that roadmap might look like. So I've got a few clients who just come to me and they're just dealing with me alone, none of my development team at all. I'm just helping them walk through the problem, the statements, the problem statements, what they're trying to solve, and how that might actually lay out over time given their ultimate goal, especially in health products where you might be thinking about compliance. So TGA or FDA approval, all of a sudden you've got this whole extra complexity that even if you're not going to planning to do anything with that 5 years, you need to know that you're planning to do it now because otherwise, because the requirements are so complicated, the technology requirements to do that, to put them into place so that you can evidence how it was built and what those systems are later. So you kind of have to need to know if you're going to do it. And there's a bit of an overhead to doing that. So understanding how that roadmap might go over time. And I know startups know how to do this stuff. They know how to create that product roadmap over time, but actually matching it with the technology stack and the complexity of that technology stack is kind of the challenge that we can certainly help with.
Yeah. I guess I want to talk more about gamification and behavioral psychology in health apps. So what even is gamification? Can you talk about how it's helping user engagement, and especially for users who might not be familiar with gaming concepts even in the first place?
Awesome. Well, the fun bit is everyone loves to play games, and I don't care who you are, you will be playing games somewhere in your life. One of the original gamification systems that everyone can think about is frequent flyer points. That's a gamified system. You have points, you earn points for purchasing flights, you can redeem those for other flights, you get special deals, but not just the points alone, you also get tiers, your silver, your gold, your platinum tiers, which gets you even extra special things. These are all pieces that are gamified in our lives, even outside the digital ecosphere. And really, gamification is just one tool in a big toolbox when we talk about behavior change and using psychological insights. Gamification is just like a method to get there. But really, we talk about how it's all very much based in theory, by the way. It's not just kind of just talking about behavior change and gamification like they're buzzwords. It very much is based in the theories. I'll throw some out there. The theories of change, understanding that somebody doesn't know they might need to change a behavior, understanding how they're going to figure out that they do need to change it. How do they think about deciding to? How do we then push them into changing that behavior? And then how do we maintain that good behavior over time? And the fun one is, how do you allow for failure or the possibility of a relapse in a single behavior and getting them back on the path without making them feel like giving up? Smoking is a fantastic version of that. Everybody who's quit smoking, I've been there myself. You might quit, be doing very, very well. And then 3 months later on a night out, you get offered one, you have a cigarette and you're like, oh, damn it, I may as well just start up again. It's the idea that just having one after 3 months shouldn't and needn't be a failure point. It's just a reminder of why you were quitting in the first place. And so it's allowing people that opportunity to change. And so gamification is a way that we can leverage the little psychological bits of your brain that really wants to play. We all want to play. We all love story. We all love storytelling and narrative. So being able to meet people where they are and give them that little moment of delight, if it's like haptic feedback, that's a form of gamification, when you're tapping on your phone and it gives you the touch feel, where the screen might vibrate, or that, you touch something and the button kind of changes on the screen because it feels wonderful to use. And all of those little moments of delight can really play with the brain. And that's the simple form of gamification. That's those bit that just combines micro animations and beautiful little pieces like that to make a delightful experience. But to keep people engaged, you need to understand, what does this particular audience respond to when it comes to games? A good example is very young children. If you wanted to reward them for sticking to their behavior or for doing, I say behavior, it might be doing their homework or all of the things that they need to do. Younger children, and I'm talking primary age school, they really get rewarded by stickers. The idea that I can add a sticker to my little avatar and, I can collect things like that as a reward. Whereas if you go into a slightly older age group, the older teens, the young adults, they really respond to the same kind of sticker notions, but it's more of a currency where you can swap them with other people. Now you're bringing other people into that you can swap that item with other people, or you can purchase it, or it might be a rare item that you've got to earn. So people respond to the same thing in a slightly different way. And then older audiences, again, they don't really respond to that bit very much. In terms of avatars, they do want to see representations of self, but they're not as responsive to things like, oh, I'm going to earn a hat for it. They're more responsive to things like rewarding them in very simple ways just for adhering to it. Well done, you did very well. That's actually good for them. Tell them what they need to do and then reward them when they do it. So gamification and behavior change is very much talking about like what works for who and why, and what are you trying to get them to do at the end. So it's a fascinating area where, you know, it's not a throw everything at the kitchen sink and hope it sticks. It's very much a nuanced, tested and optimized theory. Everything changes as we go through.
Totally. And I guess, Kim, from a research perspective, what have you seen? Have you seen particular behavioural changes, I guess, with the use of the Standing Tall app that have been encouraging, surprising? I'd love to hear a bit about the research outcomes.
Yeah, so we also designed the program with behavioral change in mind. So we approach it from a different angle, but we kind of end up at the same place. And it's interesting how we actually do that together. Like it's one of the things that I'm really enjoying working with the Project Factory on this. But what we would typically what we do for our app is we run it through a clinical trial. I mentioned that a little bit before as well, where we have half of the people using the app and the other half are not using the app. And then we see the difference, I guess, between the groups. So a randomized controlled trial. And we do that in big groups of people, like trials of 500 plus. And that really allows us to have a look at behavior throughout the trial as well. We've had trials that ask people to use the app for 2 years. And that was very interesting. And what we would typically do as researchers, we follow them up for 6 months and we would say, hey, you haven't been using your app for 2 weeks. What's up? Like, can we help? Is there something that's not right? But after 6 months, we don't do that anymore. But what we have seen is really those first 6 months are essential to kind of create a routine, create a habit. And that is what we have seen as core to change behavior in the population of older people for falls prevention specifically, is to find that routine link and see where it can be attached to, which routine, which habit it can be attached to make it easier, to make it sticky. And so based on that, we've plotted different kind of behaviors and different patterns of adherence. And you can kind of identify through different people. Like some people just start really enthusiastically, and then after 2 months, they just kind of drop off and they never come back. Others just keep going. Then you've got like the people who fluctuate. And for us, it's really interesting to understand who these people are. So we would have a look at personality traits as well as chronic conditions. Reasons for dropping off might be related to like a condition that gets worse, like a pain condition, for example. And then we're trying to find ways to make sure that they get back into that routine of exercise. It's different to smoking, but there are similarities in that way. Like there might be a perfectly fine and valid reason for stopping to exercise because your sciatica is flaring up or whatever it may be. But that doesn't mean that exercise has to be out of your routine forever. So then it's a way of picking that back up. So, and we use different techniques. It goes from giving feedback to giving those little rewards, as in like, we want you to do this amount of minutes and you've reached it consecutively every week for this many weeks. Those kind of rewards help. And also internal feedback that it's actually making a difference. I think that is probably almost more important. Like we're asking people to do 2 hours a week of standing tall. It's not a small commitment. If you do that, you want it to work. So you want to feel more confident in your daily activities and to walk and be mobile.
Yeah. It's the idea of that extrinsic versus intrinsic rewards that somebody feels by using a product, and trying to get the balance right as well.
I guess this one's for both of you. The industry, I feel, is heading towards personalised care as the bog standard for all chronic disease management, which is great. But in your experience developing programs, I guess, for all adults living with these chronic conditions, how do you balance this personalisation with the need for standardised care protocols? Have you kind of faced any challenges in that space at all?
Yeah, sure. It's true. Like, and we're only starting this now, like personalized health. It's like personalized medicine. So they've started that probably a little bit earlier. And it's a fine balance, but it's not impossible. And with tools like AI now coming in a lot more strongly, we can possibly like really use those tools to make motivational messages, for example. We were talking about behavior changes before, to make those more personalized so that they're not just stock standard and they're like, it doesn't apply to me. So that kind of thing. But then at the same time, for us, it's always really important to stick with the evidence. Like, I'm a scientist, it will always have to come back to that. And the evidence says really specific things, and we break it down to the core bit of the evidence that is absolutely essential. And that will be the messaging that we will keep giving as well, to make sure that the older person in our case, also knows what's important and what is less important. But in our case, it's 2 hours of balance exercise. That's all it is. A week.
And as for my world, in the tech side of things, we've got so much more at our disposal now to that we can leverage to start delivering personalized care. And a lot of that comes down to things like sensors, wearables. Sensors and wearables gives us the opportunity to take data points that we wouldn't normally be able to get without an in-person help, like taking somebody's blood pressure. You need to be there at the time, or the idea of diabetes management. Nowadays people don't have to go and give themselves insulin injections all the time. It's just discreetly sitting on their arm, and we'll deliver that to them as they need it, so it doesn't interfere with their lives so much, because it's taking the data points and delivering the personalized care literally on the go, so that somebody doesn't have to do that. I've seen a lot of work around brain imaging technologies now, like mobile technologies, not just MRI machines, which you can then read brain activity and put that into a system. And it's things that you can't see. But I have a client who's working on technology in that space that we're looking at ways to take enough data that we can then start inferring some early signs of dementia, for instance, or Alzheimer's, but prior to any kind of indicative or physical condition or physical symptoms that may be occurring. Is there a pattern between all of this group of people that would give us a better indication or a better biomarker of whether a person is more likely to get dementia later, so we can do earlier intervention? And that is personalized care at its heart. And there's so many different technologies out there. You just have to do even a light Google search for all of these technologies in health that are making absolutely enormous impact in these spaces. But as Kim says, at the end of the day, it's still based in research. We just have so many more tools available to us. And yes, AI is going to be a massive enabler of allowing that to work at scale, because things like brain data, there's so much of it. We could sit there for years looking at somebody's brain data and only making some assumptions about what they may mean, but add that volume and putting that into an AI engine that's specially made for that, that's pretty powerful. I think it's going to have enormous impacts in social health and social impact in those areas, and public health management as well. And ultimately decreasing costs, because of course prevention is better than cure.
Absolutely. And I guess a discussion on wearables data and AI wouldn't kind of be complete without talking about data management and data privacy. I guess in applications like this, it's a tricky balance, I'm sure, to manage kind of patient autonomy and data privacy, and also sharing data with a support network, which is obviously beneficial. How do you manage it all? What's your approach there?
Yeah, and before I even answer that, think of how that scales to different regulatory pathways in Australia, UK, US, Europe, any country in the world. They've all got their own regulations and compliance that needs to be adhered to. So when you're building tech, you have to make sure that it can scale to different regions, and how do you develop that? But really, you're right. When it comes down to it, we have to, and it's not just in health, It's in everywhere now. It's health data. Sure, we no one likes the health data out there of a breach, and no naming, but it has happened. But across any technology and any large database of users and their data, you have to be very careful about how you architect a system to ensure that if there is a data breach, how do we protect a person's personal data, or at least make it anonymized so that if somebody did get the data, they can't attach it to a specific person. So the way we do that usually is very considerate thinking time and architecting time to make sure that databases don't live next to each other or on the same servers. They are actually living in separate servers around the world, or where they need to be. In Australia, you must have them in Australia. Most countries require that any of their citizens' health data remains inside the country, literally remains inside the country. So there's management on our side to do of managing servers and where traffic is and where it goes from. These are all problems we have to solve, but they're not that difficult. We just need to ask the right questions. But data and management and storage and how we handle those, and transporting of data. And when we say transporting, we might mean from the wearable itself through to a back-end system, which then gets put onto your phone. We need to make sure that that data doesn't get lost from here to there, or can be intercepted in any way. So we're constantly looking at improving every single touch point of that data, and how that gets transported, and how frequently, and who can access it as well. I mean, that's a whole separate thing as well, because in many health systems, we might have various levels of data access that need to be adhered to. On the Standing Tall program, we have obviously patients who are doing the program and generating the data. We've got their clinicians who can view that data. We have to consider, what if that patient is moved to a different clinician? How do we handle the transport of that data to the next physicians so that they can see what they can see? And then if researchers like Kim's team, they come along, if they're doing an anonymized trial, how do we give them the right data that they need, and the consents and the tracking of that data without impinging on anyone's human rights to have ownership of their data? So many questions. It's a minefield. And there's a lot of people that do a lot of good work in this space, just talking about data and how to manipulate and store it and do the right things with that data, and still not reducing all of the risk that's available to that. It's a constant battle. But as you see in any large breach, or even any kind of tech where it brings a system down, it can sometimes come down to something super, super simple that somebody forgot to do. And it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Absolutely. Well, I feel we've covered a lot of ground today. It's been great to hear about kind of considering those unique needs and preferences of older adults kind of in these health tech apps is in itself seems to be what makes the product more sticky and actually effective. We've talked about the challenges kind of from taking an MVP from pilot to kind of commercial use, and kind of how to balance that patient privacy and autonomy with the obvious benefits that come from data from wearables, from AI, and a really engaged support network. I guess before we wrap up, I'll throw the floor back to you if you'd like to share any more thoughts as a takeaway to our listeners before we wrap up.
Oh, okay. I tell you, I would probably give 3 bits of advice when talking about health tech. When you're looking at what you are trying to build, have a look, very much think about what that long-term roadmap would look like in terms of the different technology pieces that might need to come together, and really start engaging with technology people. Have a CTO available to you if you can, even if you're borrowing one, just to help guide those conversations, especially for health tech, because there's so many other considerations that, it's not just any old product. Suddenly we've got a lot more compliance and regulatory stuff going on. We want to reduce risk. We want to make sure that that roadmap can support that journey as well, and making sure that you're not overcapitalizing your budget in the wrong places, or when it should be on proving that the product works to in order to scale that.
And I think my key take-home message is the co-design. Is to really work with your target group to design a program that is actually working for them. And if you do that right, don't assume things, like not in the negative, not in the positive way, like neither direction. Just validate your assumptions before you go with them, because you might be surprised, and actually those surprises might then be not surprising after all, like once they're exposed. But it's really important just to talk to the people who you are designing the app for, because you're typically not designing them for yourself. So that would be my key takeaway. And if you do that well, you'll have an app that is sticky.
Right, good takeaways. Well, Kim and Lynette, thank you for joining us today on Talking Health Tech. And you can find more information about Miroma Project Factory and the program Standing Tall and Live with Dementia in our show notes. Thank you for joining me all, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
Thanks very much.
Thank you
for having us.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Talking Health Tech. Make sure you like and subscribe and share this episode with someone who might find it valuable. For more information and resources about healthcare innovation, visit talkinghealthtech.com.